Hey, hi, hello, welcome to episode 69 of Trail Society, produced by our fine friends over at Free Trail. I'm Corrine Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen.
And we have all been surviving a late-breaking winter, miracle March, miracle end of February. The leap year did us dirty, and it's been dropping snow on all of us. I know before we hit record, Keely was saying it snowed the last 5 days at her house up in the hills above Portland. I'm headed to the desert to crew Lululemon's further project, and timing could not be better.
I'm very jealous.
I mean, based on if I survive this thing, you might not be jealous.
That's true.
Palm Springs, jealous of. Crewing further, maybe not jealous.
Maybe not. That's very true. 7 days of crewing.
That's a lot. If anyone can do it, you can.
I know. We'll see what state I show up to Chuckanut in. It might be a Corrine runs around the course and yells at Keely versus a Corrine runs Chuckanut sort of scenario, which is fine. But yeah, I'm crewing Devin Yanko, fan of the pod. We're a fan of her as well. Actually, maybe post further, she'd be a great interview potentially, because like her training for this has been crazy and the event itself is going to be absolutely stupid in the best way possible. I'm going to be eating like a queen, but sleeping like someone who doesn't know what sleep is, and it's going to be a bit rough. But hopefully life feels more sane for both of you guys, respectively.
Yeah.
Are you home, Hill? Or are you still gallivanting around in your van?
I'm gallivanting. I got sick of the weather and the ice, so I'm.
So Hilly's who we're actually jealous of. Hilly, whereabouts regionally are you currently?
Do I want to disclose my information of where I am? I'm not sure.
Broad region.
Well, I mean, this is coming out.
California.
You're in California now. Nice. I know you're in Arizona. You were over in like the Utah area.
Exactly. I was in Arizona and Utah. I was there. I'm just such a simple girl. Just like my track record so far is 2 showers in the past 2 weeks. Haha. So
crushing it.
Okay.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Some bird baths obviously in their basic hygiene, but proper showers, only 2. And I could have gone longer, but it's okay.
You got a mooch dock somewhere. Hopefully you're doing some mooch docking in California.
Yeah.
Keely, outside of the snow, how is life in Portland treating you?
Portland's okay. It doesn't handle snow well, so it's, puts a damper on everything. But I was actually in Utah for 3 days. We were putting out some fires for our wedding, so that was a stressful week. But we're back and it's all trending in the right direction. So that like baseline stress I've had for the last month is going away, which is really nice. Definitely affects your life. You're like, oh, why am I wanting to cry?
Yeah.
So I feel a lot better. But
totally.
Stress, fine.
Stress is stress. I feel like we've all been riding that.
Stress is stress.
I told Steven this weekend that my life energy has been good, but my mitochondrial energy has been bad. Like, I feel like I've been motivated and like, I don't feel like I need to sleep more or lay on the couch or something, but like training has just felt really wonky the last like 10 days. And I just think it's like life stress on the periphery that's like not necessarily impacting my day to day, but is impacting like the way my quads feel. And so it is what it is. But yeah, stress is stress, team.
It really is.
Well, we've got a sick interview today. Maybe our new favorite human on the planet joins us, Carolina. Wow. Like we'll dive into that in a little bit, but just have to give her a plug off the top. It's super, super cool to sit down with her, and we'll be cheering her on all the way to Western States in June. But before we dive into some news and recent results, we got to give a shout out to the people bringing you this podcast, presented by The Feed, and it really couldn't be possible without them. I got notice that I've got $7 of credit that's about to expire, so I got to go buy some more waffles as soon as we get done recording this, because I cannot let that credit go absent, I guess. And you too can get credit. You too, if you're listening to this, you can go to www.thefeed.com/Trail Society, and there you can get a $15 feed credit quarterly for the year. That's $60 to spend on all sorts of snacks. Keely, I'm assuming that you're just like elbow deep in coffee bags at this point. What have you been snacking on from the feed?
Actually, I got a recent blood test back and my ferritin was super, super low, which is, kind of kicked myself in the butt there.
Ooh.
I know, really stupid. Anyways, so I hadn't tested for a while. And so I think it was just like living at altitude this last summer and it must have just dropped significantly and hasn't built back up. Anyway, so my latest order was a lot of Thorn because it's NSF certified. So it's safe for athletes. I got some iron bisglycinate. And so basically just trying to build that back up because I've been feeling like crap on my workouts and makes sense now.
Totally makes sense. And honestly, too, like big, long efforts like Doyenthanon in December as well are good ways to really kind of plummet iron stores just because you basically utilize it. You use it and you need more of it. But the Thorn products are really good. They're super tasty. Well, I don't know if vitamins and minerals are tasty, but what they are is that they're not hard on the stomach. And that is a big deal when it comes to iron supplements. Hillary, what about you?
Yeah, so I think the last time when we talked on the pod, I was talking about getting like a sample pack of some things from the feed. And one of them was like the big spring energy packets, like
big oatmeal
like
packs.
Like the new ones that they previously just had one from like the Wolf Pack, and now they've kind of built them out. One with matcha, like natural caffeine, and another one they're like, just more bang for your buck, literally like 300 calories. I was actually trying those out on a run and some rides, and I really like them. So they're a bit bulkier, but like it's no bigger than and I was also testing out some of the higher carb like the gels.
It's not more than like the 90 gram like precision fuel packs either. Like it's like that same kind of 300 to 360 calorie pack, like pretty convenient. That's got a re-screwable top. Like you can't like start it and use it a week later, I would say, from like a perishable standpoint, but it does mean that you don't have to like slurp 90 grams of carbs real quick. You can use it for like the duration of a long run or even kind of over 2 days.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's been awesome. So I think like, it's just a good reminder. It's like the more research papers I read, carbs are king. So queen, both. So
also helpful for iron absorption and getting adequate carbohydrates. So it's like,
there we go.
Circle.
There we go.
Love it. So again, if you want some feed credit, go over to www.thefeed.com/Trail Society. Get your feed credit today. Get some new snacks. We know that you guys are getting bored of whatever you're eating. Time to re-up. Okay, so we got some news, and what I put in our outline was just kind of something cool that came up in one of the newsletters that I subscribe to because I'm a big old nerd, and it was a cool research initiative that's targeted at women's health specifically, and we know that women's health categorically for a very long time has been under-researched. We don't like to use female test subjects. We don't like to use female cells, even female animals in research because we've been deemed unpredictable. And that's left some like huge gaps in the research. The NIH has tried to change that. It's only kind of working. So First Lady Jill Biden recently announced the White House initiative, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, or ARPA-H. They're going to commit $100 million towards research and development on women's health. And how they're going to do that is it's going to be called a solutions request. And they're basically going to source pitches essentially for research in this space. And then from there, they will design teams. So essentially, Jill Biden was quoted as saying, women's health research has always been underfunded. And as a result, we know far too little about our own health. The ARPA-H, which could have a more fun acronym, I'm sure, was created in 2022 as part of President Joe Biden's bipartisan unity agenda. So essentially, they're going to solicit ideas for novel, groundbreaking research and develop, in order to address women's health issues, kind of as well as opportunities to accelerate and scale tools, products, and platforms with potential for commercialization to improve women's health outcomes. So it's kind of like private sector adjacent stuff could be kind of utilized in this field. And basically, based on the ideas presented, the ARPA-H will bring together an interdisciplinary group of researchers, clinicians, technology experts, and others to accelerate solutions contributing toward the agency's mission and create a range of investments that encompass disease, agnostic, and non-traditional research approaches, which is, I think, just kind of cool. Any way we can funnel more money into research on this side of the gender spectrum is super important.
I got super excited when I saw this as well, because I was like, well, that's what I'm going into. So there'll be some funding.
You're like, more fun. Yeah, historically, if you're like not researching cancer, you like basically can't get money. So this is kind of nice that there's like some more broad base here. And I love that it'll also probably tie into the private sector as far as like utilizing upcoming technology. So I think that there are probably companies like Oura Ring, for example, that will likely kind of be able to dovetail into this research field, which is super cool. Go Jill Biden. Okay. Results are a little bit, we're kind of in a results lull a little bit. I even double checked this morning. We're recording this on March 4th, so there'll probably be more results to come, but way too cool. One of the races that historically happens the first weekend of March was canceled over the weekend due to weather. It's probably the biggest note, but since we last recorded, we have to give a shout out to the fact that the U.S. women just destroyed Trans Gran Canaria in every style, fashion, discipline, distance, etc. Like I was floored. Katie Scheid won the VK. Brittany Charbonneau was second in the 21K. Jen Lichter won the marathon. Tara Fraga won the 84K. And Courtney DeWalter won the 126K. Just like top to bottom. Greatness.
Bada bing. Yeah.
Love it. Cool. Outside of Courtney, obviously a little bit of a TNF, the North Face show off kind of like pseudo team camp experience. But Trans Gran Canaria is an important early season race. Spanish athletes come to it in flocks and droves, etc. It's a huge deal on the European early season calendar. So it kicks off a kind of 3-month island racing binge as well, with Trans Gran Canaria in February, Madeira coming up around the corner, and then Transvolcania in May. So you can race on every island if you play your cards right.
So cool.
So I was floored. They had like typical Trans Gran Canaria weather, like wet and stormy overnight into like high heat in the afternoon, like everything you want from a crossing of the island.
Nice. Yeah, the VK format was fun too. It was like staggered starts for everybody. So
yeah, a lot of the VKs in Europe, particularly on the islands, do individual start, like time trial start, just because it's very narrow. And so you don't want to mass start it.
Got it.
More very Nordic ski style.
Got it. Yeah, Katie just absolutely blew that race out of the water.
Yeah, she was like top 10 overall in the VK.
Yeah, she ran like 46
cool.
minutes, which is like close to the women's VK record. I think the women's VK record is like low 40 minutes. So fast.
Stupid. She's multifaceted. Katie Scheid will be back at Western States in June, and we cannot wait for that. I guess indoor track world champs also has been going on in Glasgow, and the US showing up there as well with some like really cool shout outs. I put in Elle St. Pierre. If you're calling her Ellie, you're wrong. Elle St. Pierre. She won the 3,000 meter title, which is always impressive, but even more impressive because this was literally days shy of her son's first birthday. So her son was over there with her. He was born on March 4th of 2023. So just the moms like showing up and showing out, like very, very impressive. Obviously, everyone's return post-pregnancy is different and varied, and no one's experience will be the same, but it's just been really cool to see moms, I don't know, like performing at the highest level in the world.
Yeah, and it was like the first time someone's won from America in the 3,000 meter ever.
It's historically dominated by East African runners who are just so talented at the distance races. I do think that all the teams for US or all the teams for indoor worlds are kind of small. It doesn't seem like they bring kind of full rosters across the board. Like the US team is also fairly small there, but still, like lining up against really, really strong talent.
Yeah. And a new American record she set too, which is so cool.
Yeah, which is just continually just super, super impressed.
So fun. Yeah. Yeah, and then I was following along through like the NBC sports page, and there was a big post that Nikki Hiltz endorsed saying that they were really proud of the sports center because they were using pronouns really well. So I just kind of want to give a little shout out there because I think that, in the past they weren't as good at using pronouns correctly. And so it's cool to see that they're actually putting a lot of effort into that and giving Nikki the, support they deserve. And they had an amazing race too, landing second, getting a silver medal. That race was awesome. I don't know if you guys watched it, but Emily McKay, who was also a USA lady, was leading for a while. And then she got overtook by the eventual first place winner. And then Nikki also overtook her. And it was just a sick race. But yeah, USA second and third, pretty darn cool.
Yeah, it was, and they'd followed up they were sitting in the back in the staging area watching the men's 1500 meter on the screen, and the U.S. men also went 2 and 3 in the 1500. And Nikki said that they turned to Emily and were like, "Okay, it's our turn," and they went and did the same thing, which is super, super sick. So yeah, it sounds like the U.S. is currently sitting in the leader's chair for most medals thus far at Worlds, which is very, very cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yay! Team USA.
Very cool.
USA. USA.
Can't wait.
Okay. Keely, just a note for you. This would probably be, if you get a word from Emily, this is probably where I'd put in that John Levitt thing.
Yep.
Because they're going to do a quarter hilly, it sounds like. And
yeah. I was reading the emails, obviously, because I wasn't there. Yeah.
But we just need them to send us copy, and then Keely will record a little thing to put in here. And then next time we record, we'll just have it more fluid and ad-libbed between the three of us.
Yep.
Okay.
Just because we don't have the actual stuff from them yet.
Yeah. And if they send it in time, we'll put it in. If not, I'll say like, hey, we'll do 1 month and we'll do 1 episode in June and we'll do 1 less in March or something. So
yeah.
fine. Yeah.
It'll balance out, which is cool. Okay. All right, meat and potatoes time. I mentioned at the top of this podcast, we have a really cool interview for you. Carolina Rubio-MacWright is my hero. This woman wears all the hats. And we were texting ahead of the podcast, and she was like, I'm a builder, not a bridge burner. And she truly is. She's an artist, an immigration lawyer, an activist who fights for immigrant and humanitarian rights. She grew up in Bogota, Colombia, and then became an attorney. And she talks about how becoming an attorney really opened her eyes to the inequities in our laws and racial power struggles and how those two intersect. Carolina combined her passion for art, legal rights, and running into several projects, including teaching about human rights through running and ceramics, and so many other things, it turns out, like ice cream trucks. Carolina will be running Western States in June with help from HOKA and Gu, and we cannot wait to cheer her on there. We have a small disclaimer. This episode was heated and passionate, and there is a little bit of explicit language. So if you're watching with kids, just a heads up. Potentially you might want to take this episode out on the trails with you this week instead of playing it in your car. Without further ado, Carolina Rubio-MacWright.
Hi, I'm Carolina Rubio-MacWright, and I am a dreamer and believer of changing the world, lawyer, mom, and a bunch of other hats.
She is our better half, essentially. That's what I like to think of you as, my better half. No, but truly, since first ever sliding into my DMs, I was like, I like this woman. So we're really, really happy to have you on the podcast. It's been long overdue. I guess I think I want to start at the very beginning. We know that you grew up in Bogota, and I'm just so curious to hear a little bit about growing up in Colombia and how that merges into you finding running as this really important piece of your life.
Great. Well, I love your podcast, first of all. Listen to all of them. Faithful fan. So it's exciting to be on the other side. So I grew up in Bogota, Colombia, and I started running, I think, at around 7 years old. I did every sport imaginable under the sun. At the time, I didn't know I had ADHD, so it makes a lot of sense that I was doing everything imaginable, and I was at school from 7 to 7. But running, my coach from the very early on, from 0 to high school, I was in a school that was from 0 to 12th grade. He sort of took me in, and he started having me compete at 4th grade. And I think he gave me sort of the belief that I could do anything in running. But most of all, I think that running became a really important tool for me to feel freedom, because living in Colombia in the middle of the Civil War, you just never knew when you were going to die. There was going to be bombings. Friends, we were negotiating kidnapping, freedom with my best friend when we were 14 years old because her brother got kidnapped. So you have to grow really fast there. And I think my farm, which I went to every weekend, and there were cows and all sorts of animals. And it was sort of the place where I found peace and where I could just be unapologetically me. In Colombia, I couldn't really be like my bubbly, friendly self because like you never knew if that person was going to kidnap you or if that person was going to, do something. And so going to college in Colombia was super awakening because you had all these people from all these different places and you didn't know who to trust. And so that was really hard. I had a few friends that were kidnapped coming out of law school. I was doing law school and art school, like the first person doing like two big majors. So I was in college from 7 to like 9 p.m. But yeah, eventually I just had to move because I was getting death threats. I was super active in law school. And I just speak up whenever I see something wrong. And so that led to having taxis follow me and my dad getting phone calls that they were going to kidnap me. So we had to leave at 19 years old. When I was 19, left with my brothers. And so we landed in Miami. We were very lucky, and I'm very aware of the privilege of being able to land in an apartment with a car and having a college lined up. So that's kind of the story. I mean, Colombia has amazing, beautiful things, but like 80s and 90s were not the best of times. And, I think I just felt everything very deeply. And so the war and seeing the inequalities of wealth was just really jarring for me. And so I think that kind of sets the tone for how running was and is to this day the tool where I sort of go and cleanse myself and find liberation.
Yeah. And it sounds like when you all landed in the US, that running really became this glue that held you and held your family that was with you together after like this major big life disruption. And so I'm wondering what running meant for you at that point in time and really for your whole family as you guys had to like, completely reset life a bit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the nicest things about running is that it really became sort of our church. Like it was my family's church. So my mom, my dad, my dad runs Boston every year. They've done the mayors. Running was like the Saturday thing we would do. So we'd find a 5K, we'd go, we'd all try to podium. We're super competitive with each other. And so it became sort of this ritual where we could be part of something bigger without necessarily having maybe the language or the cultural same, like the same cultural, I don't know, beliefs or whatnot. But it became this place where we could just be and feel happy and joy and just connect. And I think ultimately just feel free.
Yeah. I think many people have experienced something adjacent to that, right? Something where running is that palate cleanser, their sense of freedom, their, I don't know, ability to kind of actually reground themselves. And then having brothers, I have 2 brothers, and I don't care about beating anyone else, but beating those 2 has been like a life mission for me. So I feel that in a big way. I mean, despite the fact that you've been an endurance athlete basically your entire life, having started competing in like school running events as a 4th grader, you didn't come to the trails until like 2019, and you didn't do your first ultra until 2022, which is like kind of crazy to me because I feel like you're a friend that while I haven't known you for that long, I feel like I've known you for forever. And while you haven't been in the trail community for that long, you've also like been making a huge dent in it. You're like our biggest like convert as far as like bringing all the roadies with you. And so I'm curious, right? Like how did that love of running, that sense of freedom, that Saturday church sensation bring you into the trail community and then like the ultra community as well?
Yeah. So when I did law school in Oklahoma and did work in the border. And so I did crew for a while and I kept sort of running, but as a law student and immigrant, like I had no money. So I had to do research because I couldn't really work outside of campus. And so much of my life and my journey has been dictated by my visa and the opportunities that I've been able to do. So like while my friends were skiing in spring break, I was hustling in school, trying to make money. so that I could like live and make sure that I had, I was working for Catholic Charities, for the Public Defender's Office, for all these different entities, because I needed to make sure that someone sponsored my visa so I could stay in the country. It was like my real livelihood. But I continued to exercise. Like I really needed sort of like that outlet. So I continued to run. And then once I was a lawyer, I moved to Miami. I kept on running, but there was something missing in the road. Like it just was not cutting it. And so I moved to triathlons, and I started doing triathlons, and then like very quickly started doing like half irons and Ironman. And I found like an amazing community there. And so I met my husband, and he was very patient with all of my training. I signed him up for for an Olympic triathlon, the New York City Triathlon, a week after meeting him. He told me he could swim. He did not know how to swim. Like I think I have injured him for life now. But so after we got married, he was like, "Can you tone it down for a minute and like not like be like running and biking and everything?" So I kind of toned it down a little bit. And then, I got pregnant, and I still ran. Like I was still running and doing halves and marathons. And I think like a big thing was my dad was running the Boston Marathon when the bombing went off, and he basically like crossed the finish line and the bomb went off. And so that felt like such a personal attack on me and like my family, because it was like this was the one safe space that we had, and now this thing happened. And so I had 6 weeks to train for grandmas, which my parents were going to run. And so I was like, I'm going to qualify for this thing. And so I ran, I qualified, but then I got pregnant.
Without the pregnancy deferral policies, I'm sure.
Yeah, look at that. So, I trained, but it was going to be really dumb to like do it at 27 weeks. I mean, I am like built to breed babies. So like my hips expand. I look like, I gained 50 pounds with each pregnancy. Like I'm not these graceful, like super skinny women who have their tiny bellies. I like embrace it, eat Mr. Softy ice cream every day. So I feel like that then propelled me a little bit back into running. And then in 2019, my friend Anna, who's like been in ultras for a long time, and she's one of my closest friends, she was like, let's do this camp, this Rob Carr endurance camp. And
I love that that's your first touch point with trail is the Rob Carr endurance, like ultra endurance camp. Like what a special human to like welcome you into the space.
I know. And he's actually training me for Western right now.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So it comes like full circle. It's like such a special sort of little circle that we're building here. But so I had no idea what shoes to wear. I was like, what do we do? Like, what is this thing? And my husband for years was like, I really think you would like trail running. And I'd be like, no, I'm an asphalt girl. I like predictability. I like my times. I don't like the rocks, like the roots. And after that first camp, I'm like, I cannot road. I am all about roots and rocks. And like, I love bugs and like, just like the rhythm and the changes of weather. And so it's, as soon as I started trail running, I'm like, oh my God, where was this all my life? So like now I'm like a convert, and I love the trauma dumping that everyone does, because I'm like, oh, there's people like me on the trails. So it's been really amazing. And like, I'm just so grateful that Rob's camp, Rob and Christina create such an inviting and such a sort of loving space for beginners, midpointers, whatever sort of point in your ultra journey you're at, that it was just like the perfect intro.
I love that. Hillary perked up as soon as you said bugs. You guys will have to go on a run at some point so that you can go just like identify things.
Yes, I adore bugs. It's like, I was thinking the other day how, we have all these races and it's all about how quick you are. And I'm like, colonization took away so much of our imagination and capitalism. And I'm like, why don't we have races where like the person that wins is the one that collects the most bugs, or like, I don't know, best photos or most interesting conversations, or like the highest range of ages collection that you can get. Like, why don't we have those races?
It sounds like race directing is in your future, and they're going to be like very, very eclectic.
You want to team up? Yeah, let's team up and like I'll do the bug collecting thing. That'd be so cool, like a scavenger hunt type of race. I've got this too.
I dig it. We got something brewing here. I love it. I love it so much. We kind of want to talk a little bit about, your role becoming a coach, because that is one of the hats that you wear. You wear a lot of hats. Our intro kind of covers, I think, all of them, but you wear a lot of hats, and one of them is becoming a coach. And I think that's one of like the earliest DMs that we might have shared was like, you like sliding in to my DMs to be like, I think I want to be a coach because no one looks like me. No one understands me. Like I see these women who like, we need someone to relate to. And I just remember yelling like, yes, please do it. But I guess like speaking now, you're a coach, you coach mostly women of color, but women kind of broadly. And I'm wondering why you felt it was so important to become a coach. Like, what was your why in doing it? Because I think it's like mission critical to who you are.
No, 100%. I mean, I think when I did Ironman, I had one coach, but it was like, I couldn't really talk about my period. I couldn't talk about like how I'm feeling or my emotions. And I think running is such a spiritual and such a full body experience for me that it can't just be numbers and like it had to be different. And in looking for coaches that looked like me, there were like two that I could really find, and they were super inaccessible. And so given that I work with so many immigrants and different populations that really don't look like anyone in the trail community, really, I just felt like, if no one is doing it, then like I better learn how to do this, And so I started, doing all the certificates so that I could be a source for people like me, like younger women who can't find themselves reflected and can't have a conversation about being a brown body in the trails. And when you have like a bro group of guys coming over and sort of like the safety aspects and the extra layers of, I think, of trauma and of microaggressions that kind of aggregate. And so I really wanted to be sort of like someone that people could come to, and I could train and I could give them pointers and really see them as a whole person and not just numbers. And so it's been amazing. Like it's been really, really fun to, I approach everything in my life very sort of scientifically. I'm not a scientist, but very much like I treat law. Like, these are like the issues, like how are we going to tackle them? What is the best approach? And everything has to be done with intentionality. Like, I think that's something I try to do in my life with my children, with every decisions that we make, where the intention is so important. Like there's an energetic piece to it. And so it's been amazing. I train mostly women of color. I have some white ladies. And it's been amazing to, navigate also perimenopause and menopause for some. And that has been sort of an awakening for me as well, where nobody's talking about these things except you guys in this podcast.
And we're like not experienced in either. We're like, we're going to talk about this because it's important, but like, we're all a little ways out from also experiencing perimenopause and everything that it entails. And that was like actually the next question I'd teed up for you is like how important it is to be working with athletes who you 100% understand where they're coming from. And like that includes like the perimenopause and menopausal journey that is like, I don't know, still like not well understood. And like the hangups that come with that, right? Like these women are finally of an age where they like, that maybe like their kids are more grown, they have enough of like financial, like they're in a place financially where they can afford to like pay for this extra thing. And then all of a sudden it feels like your body is like, I don't know, fighting against you. Yeah. Like, how do you like intercept them in that place?
And I think that's something that I'm having now much more understanding as like I'm working with HOKA on a few projects, and there's so much invisible barriers, besides obviously just the obvious ones. But like for women, I feel like the fact that there's no data, that our doctors don't believe us, that, they question why we're asking for like a deep dive into iron or a deep dive into hormones. And it's so frustrating because, I've had two athletes where I was like, I want you to get these panels. And like, I'm not a doctor, but like, I'm like, this is just like the basics that I know. And their doctors were like, oh, wow. Yeah, we should have done that. I'm just like, what the heck, like, and so it's also different when you are a BIPOC person going to your doctor asking these things. It's like an extra layer of pushback. And so I feel like the more sort of people that you have talking to you and disseminating information, and people that you can relate to deeply and can share these things, like I'm having night sweats, or, I don't know, my period's kind of off, I'm super moody. Then, the more that we talk about it and the less shame that we have around it, the more tools and hopefully the more studies that can be out there. It's just, I have so many friends that are not runners that are dealing with it. And it's been such a journey, and it's so alarming to have so many doctors just ignore symptoms and not really value our voices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Carolina, I've had this experience too as a coach, where I think a lot of my athletes would come to me in their early 40s, late 40s, early 50s, and, have all of these weird symptoms. And they would be like, I don't think I'm overtraining. I think I'm eating enough, all these things. I'm having night sweats. My heart palpitations are here. Like, what is going on? And I would just bring up menopause. I'd be like, well, maybe you're going through perimenopause. Like, have you talked to your doctor? All of these things. And it was almost like opening that door, even if like it wasn't quite it yet, or like they hadn't they hadn't went to their doctor yet. It like gave them so much relief. So I wonder if like you notice that too, is like just by opening that door and talking about it, if your athletes are able to like push through it and like advocate for themselves a little bit more. Because I feel like until I brought that up or would open the door for them to talk about it, I feel like they were trying to put it on something else. They were like, this must be this. And then as soon as it's like, it could be perimenopause, they're like, oh, maybe it is perimenopause.
Yeah,
I'm going to go to
it.
my doctor and be like, I need this blood panel. And if you tell me I'm not in perimenopause and I feel like I have these symptoms, then I'm going to think I'm in perimenopause and I'm going to keep tracking stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's so important. But yeah, just kind of want to hear more about like your experience in that realm.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's been also trusting your body, right? I think that the first time I've ever been injured in my life, amazingly, was 2 years ago. And I just twisted my ankle. It was really dumb. And it's so dumb. I mean, but we do dumb things. And, and it's like this trusting your body. Like I've trusted my body so much, and I'm so aware. I think also because I had to be growing up in Colombia, I had to have like 5 eyes everywhere. I had to sense the barometer of people. I feel like I can sense danger like 5 minutes before anything happens. And so I think part of it, and so much of the work that I do with immigrants as well, is like trusting your body and really listening to your body. And so like when you're dropping in meditation or you're breathing, like where does it feel? Like, where do you feel off? And just sleeping more, or like pumping your, doing more iron or doing more protein. What time of day are you eating? Like there's so many variables to figuring out like what is wrong. And I just think that, we approach things in such a recipe way, and it's just not the way to do it. There's so many barriers, like so many variables and so many things that come into play that I feel like doctors don't believe us. And unfortunately, like science is so not holistic. They just see like one single thing. And I feel like that's what I felt with coaching, where it was just like, these are your numbers, here's what we need to do. But, there's no putting into account, my kids had the flu the last 2 weeks. So, I've been waking up. I haven't been hydrating properly because I'm doing this and that. And so it's sort of really seeing the whole being holistically, and understand, sort of like working with that really leads to not just being aware of your body, but also being able to advocate for yourself. Because that's what I do with somatic legal education, where it's all about reminding yourself of your power and saying no, and practicing how it feels in your body to say no. I don't agree with you, and having the guts to go to another doctor and seeing what they tell you until you have answers. And it's the same thing that I say about running, like I run because it's my daily feeling of liberation, so that I know what my body feels when it's in freedom. And when I walk into systemic oppression in places where they ask me if I'm the nanny of my children, or what I'm going to do with the money that I'm checking out from the bank, or if I belong in these spaces, I know how to respond, because I have been out in the trails where I can be unfetteredly free and there are no restrictions. And I know how that feels in my body. And then I can then respond in the way that will be effective.
And we're going to dive into activism here in a second, because that's a huge part of what you do. It's how we met. And I'm curious, because running is definitely inherently tied to so much of that for you. And I'm wondering how running and activism combined to kind of create your professional passions.
Yeah. So it's really amazing, because I'm right now, finally, as a lawyer, I didn't quite fit in the lawyer world. I didn't quite fit in the artist world. I never quite fit anywhere. And so I call where I live the estuary, which is really the place where most fertility comes to fruition. And so I come up with all these crazy workshops. And, I did the ice cream truck of rights a few years ago, where we distributed 7,000 ice creams in the hardest COVID hit neighborhoods. We had ice cream flavors like not without my lawyer fudge, and 3 ways of voting Neapolitan flavor. And it was 24 different flavors. And it was like, okay, how do you feel freedom in your body? And how do you make sure that you know the information? We created a chant with Carnegie Hall so that people, maybe it's through music that people really learn that information. And so, running, when you are running, you are sort of activating different parts of your brain. You're not staring at a person and all of your concentration is going towards the person, but you are in movement. And so there's a vulnerability that can show up when you're in movement. The same way than when you're doing ceramics, you're using your hands and there's a part of your brain that is focused on that. So there's a little bit of vulnerability and a different part of your brain ignites. The same with cooking, which is why we also do cooking. Textiles, same thing. And so it's a place where you can become vulnerable. And so much of what I do and what I have learned has transferred into sort of my activism and the way in which, I've been able to sort of navigate, where I did work in the Hill and I understand how certain laws have been drafted to help the drafters, right? There's no reason why 12 million undocumented people should be documented when we're paying only $3 for an avocado that actually costs $7 to harvest, if you're going to be fair in paying people what they deserve for what it takes to actually harvest them and the time it takes for that avocado to grow. And so why would there be any interest for there to legalize people when we're all reaping the benefits of it, especially corporations? And so those have been, in running, I think I resolve issues, I come up with ideas, and I also remind myself that I am powerful and that I can sort of build change. And it might not be the change that we're sold as where it's oh, you're a movie star and you're discovered. It's actually the small actions, the little drops of sand that through your podcast, or speaking names in rooms where those names are not spoken in, giving each other opportunities. It's through those little movements that sort of you open doors for others. And so running has been important, not only for me to solve problems, but now we're building a running rights and land workshop where we're actually doing rights, running, and sort of building that activism and also building some bridges into that. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it totally does. And I'm actually just rearranging things in my Google Doc because I want to dive right into that. And then we'll talk more about Western states and HOKA and kind of what's going on in that. Actually, we'll talk about HOKA now, and then we'll talk more about some other kind of minorities.
Sorry,
and
this
trail
is the ADHD
stuff.
brain.
I love it. I love it.
And wait till it hits, and perimenopause really messes with that. So if any of you have it, look forward to it.
So I think we're going to first start with talking about touching lands. You mentioned working, like helping individuals know their rights and approaching that through like clay and ceramics, approaching that through salsa workshops, approaching like that through ice cream trucks, like the list goes on. And so I think this is a great opportunity and like moment, talk about like saying names where they need to be said and like elevating voices. I told you before this, like, we just want to hand you a megaphone. And so what is this project Touching Land? Like what is where did it come from? What are you what are you hoping to do with it? What have you done with it? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So Touching Land is a nonprofit that I started basically right after Trump took office. And I did a bunch of workshops, know your rights workshops, and people were just deer in headlights, not knowing what to do. And so I was like, there's got to be a better approach to disseminate information in a less intimidating environment. And so clay is super forgiving. It's like such a gorgeous material. And it allows for that vulnerability and for community building. And so, so I started there and I started in dingy nonprofits. Then I moved on to bigger studios because I really wanted immigrants to feel like they belonged in those beautiful studios, not just cleaning the studio, but actually belonging and working next to each other. And so it became this workshop where people learned, what to do if a warrant showed up, what to do to advocate for your rights. And the results have been amazing. Like we've had women leave abusive husbands, call on their bosses that have been abusing them, advocate for higher pay. The average salary of most of the women that I work with, which a lot of them are indigenous from Guatemala, Central America, all over, is $8 an hour, which you can't do anything with that in New York City. So, we started doing all these things. There's different iterations. I work with Central St. Martin University as well. I do a lot of work at the border. And it was after doing policy work where, as I said, it's not going to change. Like there's no reason to change something that is so profitable. So I was like, I got to teach people how to understand that they have rights and that they have to get their case done within a year, that their kids can go to school, that they can go to libraries, that they can go to parks, that they can go and run and join a running club. And so, it's morphed into different iterations, and we've done work all over the US. It's a very small team, but we get stuff done. And so now, as running, it's sort of like all my journeys are sort of coming together, and running is now becoming so much sort of more important. And as I see, as I started joining trail running and seeing that the space is super white and so inaccessible, especially in ultra, it makes sense, right? Who has time to dedicate all those hours on trails when you're barely making, minimum wage, or you have 3 kids, or you have 3 jobs? So it's a very privileged sport, right? But so now we're building these programs. I started running with men from West Africa, from Senegal, and from Mauritania. They all come with sandals. In New York, it's like the middle of spring, and they have sandals that don't fit them, and they're just stuck there, being moved from shelter to shelter, unable to really settle. So I started running with them, and I started hooking them up with shoes and shorts, some shoes that you've sent me and other trail runners have sent me, because I've been collecting shoes forever. And we started running, and I don't speak French. All I know is le poisson, so funny enough, most Mauritanian men are fishermen, and sadly, they're the result of climate change. They're migrating, and we're seeing people from different parts of the world as a result of climate change, because, when 75% of your economy in Central America is agriculture, and you have floods and hurricanes and super unstable weather, you go to wherever there's opportunity, and so many people have families here in the US. And so I started running with these guys, and it's been incredible. Like we would sing Bob Marley, and I would make sure they were hooked up with cafes and they knew where the nonprofits were, so that they could start settling. And so now we're building a program that's more like a 12-week program. And it's geared towards where I live, where we're teaching people their rights for the first 6 weeks. We're also looping climate change. And then we are getting like these super addicted road runner people to come and buddy up with the new runners. And then 6 weeks later, we're going to do a final trail run in the woods. And so we're doing more intro clinics to trail running with Black Men Run and Sasquatch Trail Runners, who are amazing groups of running groups here in where I live. And so it's like, how can we build those bridges? And I feel like I've been doing this for a long time. I know what works. I know sort of the somatic practices. I'm a lawyer. I do mindfulness. So I feel like it's sort of the perfect conduit to build these workshops.
Yeah, turns out there's only you that touches all those spaces, which is amazing. And we'll replug it at the end too. But I just love it because I know that that's happening really like super locally to you. But I imagine touching lands being all over the place, like everywhere
Yes, I mean,
where we
totally,
have immigrants settling.
I mean, the goal is really to create a model that can be disseminated, which is exactly what I do with the women I work with, right? They become sort of, you teach them how to fish so that they can go and teach others how to fish. And so it's sort of this recipe, right? You need these ingredients, and then like it's effective if applied anywhere in the US, because I feel like a lot of times it's building the bridge of this like just destroying the fear that people have and these ideas that we're fed. And it's like an empty space in your brain where once you're able to identify, Hassan, or you're able to see Ivan, and they like Dunkin' Donuts too, like I do. And there's that commonality. All it takes is that commonality. And then when you see the fear mongering on the news, you're able to say, well, Sahan guy was kind of nice.
Yeah, it doesn't align with what I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super, super important. I want to change gears a little bit, but it's still very much, I don't know, in line with this topic. And I want to talk a little bit about the Footprints camp from this past fall. And like, I know you're not a bridge burner. You're very much a builder. And I know from the outside that looking in, things seem to go a little bit sideways for a number of campers there who definitely walked away, I think, at least initially, very hurt and very disenchanted. And so I would love to hear and be able to share a little bit about like what happened there, and then how can we set up people to come together to kind of tackle those issues moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Footprints was kind of a debacle, and it was a lack of preparation to some degree, and a lack of understanding sort of the people that you were dealing with. You had 6 or 7 women, super highly educated BIPOC women, who before going to the camp made sure that it was going to be a safe space. Mm-hmm. And they were reassured that it was going to be a safe space and that, certain actions were going to be taking place. But, the camp, you have a bunch of people who are trail runners, and like the trail community is really special. I really believe this. It was going really well until it really wasn't. And so it was a combination of, not letting the indigenous person do the honoring of the land, but having the white man do it, not miking women, but only miking men, and then sending all of the BIPOC women to the police station to help them pick up boxes after these women had shared their encounters with police the night before, and how, like the proximity to harm to us is so real. Mm-hmm. And when you don't understand that piece, you can cause a lot of harm, right? We were in the middle of like rural Vermont, and you're sending like 6 brown women into the station to help out with some boxes. We were cleaning debris from the floods in Vermont, and we had no masks. We were given some random gloves, and the entire scene looked like the border or some place where we all had been. Perhaps not the other, other people in the camp. And you had people being super insensitive about, photos that we were finding. And they were just like, look at this CD, let's take pictures and, let's show how great we are, like cleaning up. The owner of the property came out and started shouting at us that we didn't have permits to be in there, that he was going to get in trouble. Oof. And so like, imagine if it had been a group of mostly Black and brown people doing that. That could have escalated.
Safety feels really, really in question all of a sudden, right? Like it's just a total oversight in your lived experience more than anything, I think.
Totally. And also like just have respect over someone's tragedy. They lost everything and you're making fun of it. And you're also recording it to feel like a hero. And so it was that we had some truth telling circles. I was a mentor, and I'm like, we're going to I'm like,
Yeah.
I will work the face and I'm like, I will make it work and we're going to make sure that everything is good. But there was a point where I was like, damn, like I can't, I have to make sure that these women are safe because that's what I have to do in this situation. And I felt like I had to be a mom and sort of explain why these things went wrong and how they went wrong. And the part that was really frustrating about it was we shared our experiences. We told them what went wrong. They said they were going to do different, that they were going to think about everything. And then the next day in front of everyone, they're like, okay, we're going to come next year. And then they ignored the one BIPOC woman that really wanted to present something to the community. They forgot to mention her in the entire presentation. And so it's all these tiny little, cuts and mishandlings. And it's
which are like
we're
added to like a lifetime of cuts and mishandlings, I think is like something that's obviously totally missed.
Totally. And I think it's that lack of understanding and sort of all those cuts, but also you just told us, you heard us. We spent an hour and a half explaining to you how we feel. And then you just told us you're going to do something and you immediately did the opposite.
Yeah.
And then you did the same thing the next day and you posted Footprints Australia, find your tribe with 12 white people on it in the front when you said you were shutting everything down.
You're like, oh, this is not going well. And I think that they have at this point had to kind of like take a step back from everything. But it brought up this idea of like intentionality, right? And this idea that like having the best of intentions like really isn't enough. And the idea, behind that is that, with power comes like heightened responsibility. And so I'd love to like just like have you, I don't know, ruminate with us on that for a second about this, like how having good intentions, like that is a seed, that is a starting point, but it's like, it's not enough to like walk into a space and think that what you need to do or what has to happen, because I think that is probably a misstep that many of us make, that many art like race directors probably make, that, trail run communities probably make, and just trying to like reflect on how we can make sure that we do truly create like safe spaces for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that more than, there was good intention here. But it was lack of preparation. Like, I think 7 days is too long. Like, there were so many other elements that sort of did not play in their sort of in their favor. But I think you have to have the education and the understanding and sort of, I walk into spaces knowing absolutely everything about the people, who I'm mixing, who's coming in, to make sure that there's going to be no hiccups, and when you have two white dudes managing a bunch of BIPOC women, that's just not going to work.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Totally. And I think that a lot of times like guys get like, oh, you tried, that was so great. And then like we are seen as sort of like the ones that cause the harm. And what people don't see is the continued sort of the accumulation of that harm. And like, for me, I never had anybody stand up to me when I was in my 20s. When I had career services come up to me and say, you're never going to find a job because you're not a citizen, get out of my office. Like so many situations where I wanted to make sure these women were safe and felt heard. But I think you have to have the training. You have to have the intention to really, when you talk about climate change specifically, you have to be able to talk about like the people that are actually affected by it, not just the skiers, right? I'm part of Protect Our Winters now as one of their athlete alliance people. And I'm excited to be able to talk about migration and the effects of migration in the Southern Hemisphere of climate change and how our actions are affecting them. And how, we have to have those voices. And maybe in these spaces, Corrine, maybe it's about having more of those BIPOC people lead the spaces, and yeah. It takes, it takes a lot of like humility and sort of grace, courage, and a little bit of risk to do this. So like, I commend, the Footprints, Nate and Dakota. I think they really were trying hard, but you have to, there's got to be more than just that intentionality. You have to really understand that there's going to be there's going to be a time of like, where we're going to have to all be uncomfortable, but we're all going to have to be willing to be uncomfortable. I think about mycelium a lot in the situation where, when there's an oil spill, and the same with my kids, like when they do something wrong, the action is not like, oh, you suck, you reprimand, it's not like this judgment thing, but it's like, actually, I expected more from you. Like, you have so much potential. You are amazing. In some cultures, they go around the person and they actually say, these are the amazing things that you have done. Like, this is what we're expecting from you. And back to mycelium, when there's an oil spill, and mycelium actually like hugs the oil and contains the oil. And so I tried to think about that. And I think there has to be a little bit of grace, but it feels like there's two reactions of when this happens. People either sort of disappear, or they really say, I'm so sorry, I'm going to do the work. And I think we've seen both with footprints. But I think it's just going to take a little bit of courage and also being okay with saying, I fucked up, and I'm going to do better. And can you help me to do better? It's just hard because so much is asked from us. And like, it's like, we're the ones harmed, and then we're the ones that have to fix it.
Yeah. It's like, teach us now. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, no, like you go learn. Like, I'm open to obviously like helping you in any way, because that's who I am. And I've been, I felt like I was the mom. I was a 42-year-old mom, and I was like just directing my children. And so I wanted to mimic how I treat my children, and how and myself, because like, I don't know everything and I fuck up all the time.
You're like, I'm going to gentle parent my way through this moment. Gentle parenting.
I totally did.
Forward.
And listen, and I kept telling the women, I'm like, listen, like, you cannot, I'm sorry, I'm going to swear again, but I'm like, I've lived so much of my life with a fuck you attitude, and it's taken me really far, when there's injustices and all this, but I'm in my, you have to love gently era. And so instead of having that fire, it's like, bring the fire, but like in a loving way, and sort of in a humility way, in a allowing grace. And then vulnerability shows up if you're able to give that vulnerability and that grace some space.
Yeah. I think that kind of ties into this notion of tokenism. And I think that we've had some conversations with different folks in our community over the last like probably 2 or 3 years at this point, of just like trying to understand tokenism, and understanding when does tokenism go from, or when does inviting someone to the table, reaching out, sponsoring you, supporting you, whatever it might be, wanting to utilize your skills potentially, when does it go from like tokenism to like actually doing good, actually increasing representation, actually giving someone a seat at the table? Because I think that that's like this line that we're trying to walk, where it's like, it feels like it's always initially going to be tokenism. Like when someone wants to utilize your face or your skills or your story, but when does it go from tokenism to something that's much more substantial?
So I'll give you an example. I think my experience with HOKA has been not tokenism at all. It has, like, we're working together and they're actually hearing me, really hearing me and really seeing what I'm seeing. And they're wanting to help me and build whatever I want to build and help me in whatever way that they can help me. They're not plastering my picture all over, because it happens everywhere, right? It's like you go to a super bro white trail race and then there's like a black picture of a man in the audience. And it's like, what does this have to do with the race? It's like, you're just kind of ticking the equity,
it's like those college brochures, it's like, that's representative, totally. Right?
But so like with HOKA, like I'm like, listen, I want to have a panel at Western States. I want to talk about invisible barriers for like women and BIPOC communities. I want to, I told them when they asked me if I wanted to run, I reached out to you, Corrine, remember? And I was like, oh, I don't know.
Is this legit? What do I do? Yeah.
What do I do? And I'm so happy that I said yes. Obviously, like I realize now what Western States is, and I would have not said no. But I was like, yes, and can you give me shoes for the border? because I've been collecting shoes for the border. And they're like, yes, 100, 1,000. How many do you want? That was their response.
We want all of them.
And so, we're right now trying to this program, which is Pass the Shoe, which is essentially what I've been doing by collecting shoes. But the idea is after races, we'll have some buckets and we'll collect shoes from runners. We'll obviously do a campaign, and we're trying to see if Western states would be open to it. And it looks like they will be. But the idea is then the shoes will be shipped to the border or shelters, and they'll contain this QR code. And the QR code will lead to rights, access to trails, access to parks, information, scholarships, and also running groups that are inviting, so that people can have an extra layer of information about their rights and also about running and how they can use the shoes.
So we're like beyond excited that you got a HOKA spot. I think you're supported by HOKA and Gu in your run at Western States this year. But tell us a little bit like how excited you are to get to be on that start line in June, because it's so special. It's such a special race and event.
I know. Well, I'm super scared.
I feel like we've had that talk too. You're like, am I going to be ready for this? I am so terrified.
Yeah, no, but I'm really excited. I think it's, I'm coming to it with a lot of sort of grace and hope that I love the work that Jordan has been doing. I love the work that you all have been doing. I mean, I had some hesitations, but I'm super stoked. I'm really excited to be working with Rob. It just feels like very, just really special to have someone that has done the race and someone that saw me when I had a panic attack at the top of Humphreys Mountain, and needed like basically for him to like hold my hand and others could come down, and sort of come to this place where I'll be able to run there and sort of, to me, it feels super easy to run 100 miles when I see people, walking 3 or 4 months with a tiny baby attached to their chest and a child in their hands crossing, a jungle in order to give their children better opportunity. So I feel like it's an honor and a joy. And anytime that I have the ability to be in spaces where my people are not, I make sure to say the names that need to be said. I make sure that I open doors and that I make sure that they're not forgotten. And because, I'm here and I'm able to talk for them. So it's a real privilege, and I can't wait to be done in 30 hours.
Oh, you'll be there. We have no doubt in that. We'll be there cheering you on. I'll be at the track, so you better be there. We have a couple very quick questions, so that we can get you out of here on time. And I want to reiterate from you, what might surprise people from this work that you're doing at the border, because I know that it really like touched me hearing about like why bringing running shoes to the border and kind of the community it creates there is so important. So we want to touch on that. And then we want to touch on having a megaphone and then where people can find you. So tell us a little bit about the work at the border specifically.
It's I've been going to the border for like 20 years and sadly not much has changed, but people come with really no shoes, and shoelaces are taken away from people when they're in detention because they're afraid of people hanging themselves with the shoelaces. So, having shoes, like I told the HOKA team, Hollis, I told them, shoes change people's lives. And we have so many available. And I think roadies more than trailies are like, it's a little dent. Let's get a new shoe. And so why not keep those shoes out of landfills and use them in a way where people can do something? I do a lot of like play know your rights with the kids in the shelters. There's 2 shelters in Mexico I work with over 2,500 people. And sadly, the darker your skin, the less likelihood that you have of crossing. If you're Russian or if you're Chinese, you immediately cross and your time in the border is not very long. And so there's like rapid racism and there's no resources. So any resources, like my goal is like preventative care, kind of, where I'm like, this is the information you need to know. You are eligible for asylum. It is their right. They're not here illegally, and no human is illegal. They are here seeking asylum, and it's their right and it's a legal right that the US recognizes. So when you know that you are legal here, it completely changes the way that you walk in the world. And so, these people are looking for another opportunity. I'm no different than them. I just happen to have been born to parents that had money. And so I go down there a lot. I bring my family, I bring women and lawyers and all sorts of people down there just to see and feel a little bit of humility. And, it kind of reminds me why I do the work that I do, and how in any place where I go, I try and find a way to push resources down there.
So I think on that note, how can people listening to this best help you? Where can they find the work that you're doing? How can they get involved? If they've got a bucket of shoes in their closet, much like me, what should they be doing? Like, how can they help?
Okay, so I'll answer that question, but I think an even better one is what can you do in your community? Because it really, I think that people feel like this, oh my God, let's go to the border and do something. And yes, that has impact, because you'll be able to tell stories that will impact people, and you feel it in your body. And when you see it with your eyes, it has like a different chemical thing in your body. But I think, yes, send the shoes to an address that maybe we can put in the podcast. Yes,
we can show notes this for sure.
Okay, perfect. And the other thing is get involved in your community. Like, if you're passionate, like Keely is super passionate about not making sure your menstruation and your cycle is on point and that you're eating properly, right? Like, find something that you're super passionate about. Like, I'm passionate about immigration because I went through it. Like, it's what seeds me. And so, like, if you have something, whether it's like abolition work, whether it's, whatever it is that really moves your needle, climate change, like, get involved locally, find a local organization and actually take the time. Because money is amazing, but what's really going to change people are experiences and connections. Kind of like what we're doing with a running and rights camp, where we're bringing people from a very segregated community and we're bringing them here, and we're going to buddy them with someone that is in a running group so that they can build a relationship. And that relationship that is through running, that really has an equalizing effect, right? Because that's the power of clay. That's the power of all the workshops that we're doing. You have a lump of clay. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or if you're the postman, it equalizes you, and running does that as well to some degree. So how can you, with the time that you have, what is in your toolkit? Is it graphics that you can help for the nonprofit? Or is it maybe donating some time, spending time with cats? It can be an area of things, but I think when you realize that we're here to serve, that's when the change happens, because it has a change in you. And so that will motivate you to go back and do more. And you're going to realize that you actually have immense power in building change, but it starts in our communities and the grassroots level.
I love that. I also love that. I was like, cats, check. Okay, cool. I know what I'm doing later. So there's one final question that we ask everyone. And well, I think you've probably been self-aware since you were probably a fourth grader. The question though is, because we're learning, we're evolving, we're growing. And it's, what is something that you know now? It could be running related, it could be work related, whatever it is. What is something that you know now that you would love to tell your younger self?
I would tell myself that you belong everywhere and you belong nowhere. Just, I don't know, embrace your quirky self.
I love it. Find more bugs.
Yeah. I have cicadas all over my living room. And I tell my friends that my teenage years, I spent crying in the bathroom listening to Puccini, opera, and documenting deaths of bugs. And so I think that basically clarifies who I am in a nutshell. So I was a weird one. I'm still a weird one. Yeah.
That's the soundbite. That's what we're taking for this. You're amazing. Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your morning or afternoon or whatever time it is now.
No, thank you guys so much for listening. And I just invite you to embrace grace and courage and be willing to risk take. I think that's what makes immigrants so special. We've lost everything, so we are willing to risk it all because that's the only thing we know how to do.
Okay, so that was a really hard interview to end because it literally just kept getting better and better and better and better, and the clock ran out. And so we just want to say a huge thank you to Carolina for coming on. She's been a long-time listener, first-time caller, and we cannot wait to champion her all the way to Palisades, Tahoe, all the way to Auburn come June. I just have the chills and all the warm fuzzies from the interview.
Yeah, me too. It was so great.
So I think now would be a great time to give a shout out to our friends over at For the Long Run podcast, hosted by John Levitt. He is a guy who is friends with all of us, and his podcast is super fun to listen to. We've all been guests on his podcast. Fun fact. We've been on episode 244 and 42 from me, myself, Keely. Corinne's been on episode 20, and Hillary's been on episode 73. So you guys should go check those out. We have some really fun podcasts coming up as well with Jonathan. And, his goal with his podcast is just to explore the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. And he does a lot of really cool interviews with very fascinating people with very cool running stories. He also likes looking into the mental side of the sport by exploring sustainable excellence and what we can all learn from elite athletes, as well as back of the pack athletes or regular athletes. And so, I want to give a shout out to For the Long Run podcast. We'll link his podcast in the show notes. And we're so stoked that we have a partnership going with him this year, and can't wait for you guys to check out his podcast too.
To end things, we always have to do our Society Slam. And the first one has a great tie-in to our friends at the feed and nutrition. The nutrition stuff that we harp on and are so excited about. And so we've been asking you to send us your nutrition wins. And y'all came through. And you came through via the Free Trail family, via the Free Trail Slack. So plug for Free Trail too. If you want to be part of the Pro Free Trail community, there's a cool Slack channel where people follow up on topics all the time. And so this is in the Trail Society channel in Free Trail. Matt Whitehead wrote, "Love the Trail Society pod, have listened to every episode since day one, and love the discussions to eat more always." Heart emoji. I shared this in the nutrition Slack, but I also wanted to share it here because I've been doing this lately in training and racing and let people know even mid-packers in the masters category can put down big carb numbers in a race and benefit from it. I ran the big Ultra 28K on Sunday and ate 7 awesome sauce gels during the race. I meant to eat 8, but one got lost in my pack. That came out to 110 grams of carbs per hour with about 5 grams of protein per hour and 442 calories per hour. Stomach had 0 issues. It went down smooth, and I felt so much better late in the race than I thought I would with my limited training going in. If you haven't tried upping your carbs during training and racing, I highly recommend it.
Yep. And you can head over to the feed and you can up your carbs for free. Just that extra $15 credit. Just increase the carbs just that a little bit to start.
Yeah. Doing the Lord's work, Matt. Thank you for that.
Oh, that's so great. And another interesting society slam that we had. Thanks for these messages you guys are dropping in our inboxes. So interesting thoughts on handling the delay at Black Canyon in the last episode, because we kind of talked about the elite field and how that impacted people. Some people loved it. Some people, they didn't panic, the whole mentality with it. But this message was, they said that, but I thought it would have been good to touch on how it affected the rest of the field. And someone who flies in, for instance, who has no crew or pacers, has done drop bags at the 7 a.m. start and is now facing not getting to cold weather gear or headlamps when needed. The delay would have had huge repercussions to the majority of the field. And if you're going to say, pacers are needed for the back of the pack for safety, then we should also look at the safety issues for the late start, which is, an interesting fact, because, that's 95% of the race.
Yeah. And I will say that it was cancel the race or delay it. So that's the reality of what happened there. Mm-hmm. I think they made the best call possible in order to not have to cancel the event. You should always have your cold weather gear ready, independent of race delay or not, right? Like if you're looking at the weather ahead of time, like I think I had a lot of athletes all of a sudden run in, carry their jacket with them the entire time instead of having that in a drop bag, just because the weather was going to be more inclement. But yeah, headlamps are a big deal. Like basically the entire women's field needed a headlamp. And it wasn't like the top 10 got through without headlamps. It was like everyone needed a headlamp. And that was a big issue. And I think it's just a reminder that like we all need to come over prepared for races. And maybe when the mandatory gear list for 50K says bring a headlamp, we don't laugh at it, because I definitely have. I've been like, well, I'm not going to be out there after dark. Like it's a 50K. I don't need a rain jacket or a headlamp, but I think that's the reality is like front of the pack, middle of the pack, back of the pack. Like we have to be kind of over prepared with gear. And then if you don't need it, great. But it's like, you don't want to get caught unprepared. And I think there were people that got caught unprepared during Black Canyon.
Well, this is like an interesting thing because I've raced in Europe most of my career, and I've always been used to having like a mandatory equipment, even for like a 28K where you're carrying all of this gear. And I think it's just a good reminder to like, and that's how I train too, like always having that with me, regardless if it's like a race, and especially when it's a race, but also just like normal training runs of always having this stuff with you.
Yeah. But I guess like on the other hand, it's like acknowledging that not everyone has double of all gear you need. Like it's pretty expensive.
Totally.
And like, so I think when there is a change in the start time, like trying to figure out how that impacts a lot of people, if the race is now 8 hours later.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a really hard challenge.
I mean, there are people that miss their flights, type of thing, who are flying out that day. Like,
like
it's definitely
people who don't have crew. So
yeah, again, I think it was the choice between like canceling the race or dealing with the delay, and it's like they kind of came up against at odds there.
Yeah.
What
Nice.
else do we have?
Our last one for this time is chiming in on the eccentric bout loading stuff that we talked about 2 podcasts ago, where we were talking about how you can kind of prime the quads with a lot of specific downhill running, 3-4 weeks before a big race. This person chiming in that there was a study published back in 2001 shows that potentially this could last 6 months. Again, this study wasn't specific to trail running, but I do think it's like fun to note that like this is a pretty unstudied field. So like potentially your quads could hold on to some of that stimulus longer. This listener specifically anecdotally has had a lot of experience in this space where they've, ran a race with 0 downhill sessions and had their legs completely blow up. But then, 5 weeks after that big blow up, they did another race with a lot of downhill and their legs were a lot stronger for that race. And then, going into another race, which is even further down the road, their quads felt like dynamite. So obviously repeated bout effect is an effect here, especially with like 5 weeks between these races. So it's just cool to like hear from the audience how you guys feel like the research applies to you and how, maybe there is instances where it's a longer time frame between these bouts that actually does carry over. But again, there's not much study in this field. And then I also think that looking at this in relation to fueling would be super interesting because it's like, well, if you fuel super well, you stay on top of your hydration, then do like the quads rebound better. And there's a lot of things that play in these races.
Lots of variables.
Yeah. So but it's really cool. And I think it is still very individualized. So keep sending us these notes. They're very fascinating to us. And thanks for sending us another study that we hadn't seen.
Yeah. It's cool that because that was what we said. We're like, we know this could last like at least this long, but we don't know how much longer it lasts. I think the interesting thing there is too, like how many of you, myself included in this, like have cramped just horrifically in like your early season 50K. And then it's like, okay, cool. Now I'm conditioned for my next races. And I think that is this right on display. It's like you get that first like big over the top effort in. It's bigger than your training runs. It's harder than your training runs, et cetera. You destroy yourself a little bit. And then the race a month later or 2 months later feels so much not easier, but like your body absorbs it a lot better. Cause it's like, it already has that like, it's already been told that it can be really tired and like continue on. So I don't know. Yeah. I've definitely felt that.
Turns out the body doesn't like to go from 0 to hero.
Yeah. Turns out couch to 50K is never fun. No. And I guess the final thing before we let you all go is that we've been getting lots of kind of like heck yes to merch ideas, including people who are like, let me help. I can help. Or like, hey, long time listener, first time caller. I've got some ideas and we're super excited about them. So we are going to be noodling away, potentially bringing you merch, I think by the summer, which would be super sick. So, bear with us. We'll probably be running some polls on social media on Instagram to kind of get your your preferences and opinions as we work our way towards maybe having some Trail Society specific merch in the future. So heck yeah, t-shirts, hats, stickers. Let us know what you want. Slide into our DMs as always. Until next time, we'll see you out on the trails.